of a certain temporality and seasons, which are, as mentioned in my question, not always sunshine, but there's a time for everything. And to not reject the kind of seemingly less flashy and fancy and glossy summer season, where it's easy to see the brightness, the radiance in the summer season, but not so obvious on a rainy day. And then to adjust accordingly, to find the right rhythm in that, and to
Action!
Welcome to the Spirit of Yoga. We are Kirsten,
Devdas,
Burkhard.
from the Akasha Yoga Academy. On today's Tea Chat, we explore the topic of radiantly alive.
And we directly jump in with the first question. What does it mean for you to be radiantly alive, Devdas?
I think vital energy, health, vitality, clarity of mind, clarity of thought, clarity of speech, and of radiating also energetically, radiating joy, radiating presence, radiating peace.
When I'm thinking of somebody radiantly alive, I feel it's also very much connected to the heart. It's connected to contentment, to a certain joyfulness, inner joyfulness, juiciness almost also, I would say. Health, vitality, clarity, mental clarity. That comes first to my mind.
For me, radiantly alive is a vibrancy on all the levels, as you mentioned, the physical, energetic, emotional, psychological, and spiritual brightness, and this just vibrant wisdom shining through our being. So, an all encompassing joy, life at its best, shining brightly. One of my questions is that it's kind of easy and obvious to be radiantly alive in the summer on sunny days, but then even on a summer day, it can be rainy, can be a thunderstorm coming in. So, how to shine brightly, how to be radiantly alive in the challenging moments of life, when it's rainy, when I'm not having the best circumstances to support my radiance. What can I do to anyhow shine? Or maybe there's no even difference for you when you express your radiance naturally. How does that go for you if that's when there's obstacles?
It's a beautiful question. I feel like I sometimes describe it to people like the kind of overall life of radiance and the overall life of joy and abundance in yoga as being like learning to drive a stick shift. Like when you first start, you have these moments where it's like, wow, my joy should be here, but it didn't make it to the party. There's a party happening, and somehow something didn't make it. But over time, I feel like it gets easier and easier to find your flow, both in terms of practice and in terms of presence. Like by practice, I mean like, maybe you wake up on a rainy day and the day before you did an amazing asana practice in the sun, full power, sweating and just enjoying the vibrancy of that experience. The next day, rain. Maybe that's your day for a little bit of yin practice. You kind of learn to negotiate what's right for me in this moment, what's going to make my heart, sing with the natural joy and presence. And you kind of negotiate that stream better. And when that stream is negotiated well, just kind of like the maintenance of your natural joy and presence is just almost like an outpouring from that correct stream that you've kind of found the groove, found the way, and then naturally inside of that your own light shines and your own heart shines, and you find ways to be radiantly present and powerfully present moment by moment as the day occurs, whether there's sunshine or rainy days.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit like maybe establishing a beneficial habit, and then we're in a groove, in a flow. The metaphor which came to my mind when you were speaking is like a riverbed, which has an established flow.
Yeah.
And then, no, sometimes it's little water or a lot of water. The water is clean or dirty. Still, it's in the flow.
Yeah.
It's a
Beautiful. And I also think in a weird way it very much is like that, and it's almost like some days there is a little bit less water, but it's like you find a way to play inside that. It's like, oh look, there's less water today, but I can still sail some ships down the river. Or I can find some way to play and to enjoy. And that really does directly relate to the practice of yoga, right? That there are days when there's less internal flow of energy or prana, and it's like, but the practice on those days should not be less enjoyable than the practice on the other days. Just like, if there's a sunny day or a rainy day, that shouldn't affect your spirit. If there's a day where the prana is just flowing effortlessly and it feels like, wow, I was made for this, I'm just bathed in the radiance of my inner energy. And then another day it's like, okay, there's a little less energy to play with, but kind of if your topic is play and light, you find something to play on the day when there's less energy to play with. You find your dance, you find your song, even on the day when there's less available energy.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. From your perspective and your experience, Kirsten, life is not always easy. There's obstacles, challenges. How do you keep your high vibe? How do you stay attuned with that vibrancy, that radiance, even if it might not show outside to everybody, but maybe you inside still feel that radiant aliveness shining?
I feel it has to do with self-care and making space for self-care, like in those days not to just keep going as usual, and not to respond to the situation, but to actually acknowledge the fact, hey, I'm really low, I'm not vibrating, I don't feel so alive. And maybe it's a day that you also just decide to sit in that and with that, and to listen to what's coming out of that and why it is. So not just like keep on, pumping your aliveness, but also investigating like what's happening here, why is that. It's always wise to understand the reason, the cause for a collapse, because usually life wants to tell us something, right, that doesn't come from nothing. So I feel actually not being something to brush off as fast as I can, but to actually listen also to what's happening here, why is that, and then to take measures like self-care measures, to care for a broken area, for a leaking area, for an area that needs attention in life, and making space for that. So I feel it's actually wise to take the opportunity to understand where the lack of radiance or aliveness comes from, and to really use that as a sign to correct, and in this way slowly making our ways to a more constant level of vibrancy and aliveness.
Someone the other day, as you were sharing it was coming, someone told such a touching story the other day on one of the Zoom calls. She said she was practicing yoga one day, and she just exhaled, and she tried to hold the exhale out, and the minute that happened, it was like, just no, I can't do it today. Like she was gonna cry, like just this feeling came up, like I just can't do that. And then the next day the same, she just couldn't make an exhale and hold out an exhale. And then she said she just sat after practice and she was thinking, what's that about? Like in the past I could hold an exhale out, and why can't I right now? then she was remembering something that happened with somebody close to her in her life, and she was just feeling into that situation and feeling like, oh wow, like yeah, that was kind of challenging, and really looking at the situation. And then as she kind of thought about it, she came to a little bit of like some resolution and some peace in her heart, like about that situation. And the next day she could exhale and hold out the exhale. And it's just like, it's so magic how powerfully interconnected all of our bodies are, that even something you would think would be unrelated to your emotional state or your mental state, like can I exhale and hold it out, but it's somehow integrated. And the wisdom of stop and look is a really beautiful beautiful wisdom.
What both of you were speaking to is, I feel, this rhythm of ebb and flow, coming and going, of a certain temporality and seasons, which are, as mentioned in my question, not always sunshine, but there's a time for everything. And to not reject the kind of seemingly less flashy and fancy and glossy summer season, where it's easy to see the brightness, the radiance in the summer season, but not so obvious on a rainy day. And then to adjust accordingly, to find the right rhythm in that, and to adapt my response accordingly. So what you were speaking to with this self-care, we had that, I feel, a lot in our life of more than a decade plus living in the tropics, where we seemingly have this endless summer. And there can be a tendency that we burn out in that, because we always go on high vibe. It's not like this kind of Instagram, Hollywood, upbeat festival summer season lifestyle, where it's like always on and always, and the next party and the next festival and the next event and the next special guest here and the next excursion there, and like too much upbeat. On the outside might look kind of like enticing and compelling, and has this apparent surface of being radiantly alive, but it's in some ways not natural, because things come in seasons, they come and go. And no, it's not about this endless positive thinking, optimism, and it's always all good and how are you, and like, yeah, awesome, like 365 days per year. It's not really happening. It's not the reality. Social media tends to fool us into that, because most people only post on their radiant days. And then we wonder kind of like, why is kind of, for me, every second or third day I'm not feeling in my full radiance. But we always get confronted in media, in magazines, billboards, advertisements, and all types of public appearances. Now people go in public, not only in media, but also show up in whatever restaurants and so on. They show up more on their outgoing, radiant, sunny days, and on the more low energy days they stay at home, because they're low in energy, they're maybe a bit more introvert. But then we can miss out on the more subtle radiance, which can happen on other levels. No, it's, we frequently tend to associate this radiantly alive with the extrovert, outgoing kind of surface, like window shopping, like showing off. But on the yogic path, there's so much beauty also in the, let's call it, introvert or internalized aspects of radiance, which are not so obvious, and which are in this way not so compelling. They don't sell so well, and therefore are underappreciated, underestimated in their value. So maybe the both of you can speak a bit more on these internalized aspects of radiance, which are not showing off so apparently from the outside.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, something I've been contemplating a lot lately is that Yogananda had said something: every day's meditation should be deeper than the last day. And when I first read that, I was like, nobody can live up to that. Like, come on. Like, life is life. You have your days where everything's fantastic, and you have your days where everything is terrible. And, sometimes I tell the story about meditation that I used to run meditation centers in India, so I kind of had to meditate no matter what. There was not an option not to meditate. And one day I showed up for this meditation, and something had happened in my own life, and it was a bit rocky, and it felt not good, and I was just thinking about it. Literally sat down for like 45 minutes or an hour, or maybe even more, hour and a half meditation. I don't know how long it was, but the entire time, from the moment that I started until the moment I was ended, that person did this. Oh, this person did that. Oh, should that have been like that, or should it have been different? Nonstop. It was like there was not 1 second of peace in that meditation, not one. And at the end of that entire experience, I had this feeling like, that was such a waste of time. Like, I sat down, but I didn't do anything except blah, 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 blah. And then maybe like 20 minutes later, I was walking down the street, and this tremendous feeling of peace just washed over my being. And it was like, wow, even the worst meditation is still amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, and sometimes you don't see the effect immediately, but mm-hmm. further on down the line, it catches up with you. Mm-hmm. And, recently somehow I've been repondering this thing that Yogananda said about each day's sadhana deeper than the last. And I actually think there's an element of it that relates very much to what you were saying in your question. It's like, if you're looking at your sadhana as how much energy did I move inside my sadhana, how much inner feeling did I have inside my sadhana, it will not line up like that. Like, some days are more, some days are less. What did you eat? How much did you sleep? There's just so many factors that are involved in that. But if you look from the kind of point of view of connectedness and open-heartedness, then each day can be deeper than the last. Mm-hmm. And so it's maybe more like a question of what lens are you looking at that through. Mm-hmm. Because I think there is an element that each day in meditation can be deeper. But it's not deeper in terms of I got more energy moving, or I experienced more, or there was more light, or there was more sound, or there was more something. But more, there was just like this more openness to mm-hmm. and curiosity and playfulness and willingness to be and willingness to explore and connectedness to the essence of yourself and to life. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that is something that really can grow day by day. But it's a bit like you said, it's not something that people value because it doesn't splash very much. It's not like, wow, there's lights and trumpets mm-hmm. and ba 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 ba, welcome to heaven, Mm-hmm. You made it. Yeah. But it's more just like, no, there's this very subtle feeling, but it's there, of how open am I, how present am I to receive what life has to give.
Yeah. In a way, you're combining the previous two topics. On the one hand, I was asking about the sunny days and the rainy days, and we were speaking more about the kind of external aspects, how vibrant we feel, the more outgoing side of Radiantly Alive, which sometimes is more bright, other times seemingly more dull, but still can be there. And now in the second topic, we go into the internal aspects of the radiance, and you describe exactly that sometimes it's a sunny, bright meditation, easy, uplifting, light experiences, energy moving, etc. But in other days, it's a seemingly bad meditation. But there are no bad experiences. It's all a learning, and it's all a processing and integration. And as you described it, what came to me as a term is acceptance, an ability to welcome anything that arises. You use the term curiosity, to hold space, to be present with whatever comes up. So that's the sunny and rainy day, external circumstances, but also internally, whatever comes up. Sometimes it's uplifting, inspiring. Other times it's seemingly heavy, dark, or boring, useless stuff. But of course, there is also an internal processing which comes from that. So you thought very intensely for 1 hour about the pros and cons and all the voices, but it was, in a way, also a release. Like otherwise, maybe you would have been chewing on that for 3 more days, and then you condensed it into 1 hour, and then afterwards you went out on the street. It's like, now I'm fresh again. So maybe Kirsten, you can speak also from your experience about the inner exploration of radiance, the internal aspects. How do you feel inside when you're radiantly alive?
When I feel radiantly alive inside on this more internal aspects, actually I feel this is when I'm moving away from living from my mind, and moving more into a space of presence. Actually, this is when I feel radiantly alive internally, when the space in the heart opens, which is so vast, and so clear and serene and refined and just is. So when I'm coming away from these mental organizations and labelings and processing and digesting through the mind, when I'm landing in my heart, I would call it landing in my heart, when I'm landing in presence, I feel this is where a very subtle radiance and aliveness is very, very present. So I feel there's different levels of radiance when we talk, like the body, the mind, a spiritual radiance, and they have different voices or different ways they are expressing. And I feel like a radiance of body, like when I think of a radiance of body, I also think about a radiance of an energetic radiance is something more obvious and louder speaking in a way than like the radiance of spirit and of mind. So I feel it gets kind of not less present, so I don't feel that a physical radiance is more present or dominant than a spiritual radiance, but it requires more subtleness to perceive it in a way, I feel. And so the radiance of body and of energy is something much louder or more obvious in a way, I feel. Like I'm thinking of health and vitality. We spoke about vibrancy, like that's like visible to the physical eye in a way, like, and to the senses, to our common senses, and therefore stronger catching, I feel, than radiance of mind. Is still also like this aliveness on an emotional level or mental level, like a clarity of mind and an openness of heart, emotional heart, thinking of joy and happiness and kindness also, and spiritual radiance, even deeper than that, is when there's an openness on this subtle level, also something extremely strong and magnetic, but I feel it's not speaking as loud in a way because it doesn't speak to the ordinary senses so much. So this aliveness, like the more internal aliveness. When you ask about internal radiance, internal aliveness, I'm thinking more about the radiance of spirit, or the radiance, maybe emotion or mind, but like I was now touched by the spiritual radiance. And yeah, it's just less loud, less outgoing. I feel it's more like much more still, or it is still.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I feel physical radiance is something more emotion, very much emotion, and in sharing, and in more outgoing.
Mhm.
So still, it is still.
Mhm. So that absorption of internalization, and then, as you describe it, a internal subtle radiance, which either we might miss ourselves, even don't pay
Yeah.
attention to,
Mm.
because like the gross outgoing
For sure.
external obvious ones are in a way more compelling, enticing, promising in their glossiness. So that's both in our own experience. We might have a tendency to favor the, in a way, fame of the showing off, showing up externally. We might, in a way, run more after that pleasurable reconfirmation we get from outside in the externalized aspects of radiance. And then we undervalue our own inner experience and don't give so much attention and value to go deeper within to discover the more subtle aspects of radiance.
Just to give an example, like of this spiritual radiance, like I feel it was just happening recently, and it's happening over and over again. When I'm in meditation, and oftentimes or lately I start my meditations rather in the evening, and I feel so strongly when Devdas comes home in the evening, your spiritual radiance, and I perceive this so much stronger when I'm myself in meditation, when I'm myself in, my whatever I'm doing in the evening, and you come home, like I receive you much more, or perceive you much more in your physical energetic shape. And when I'm in meditation, that is not very obvious, but like your spiritual presence comes in just so strong. So when I'm more subtle and refined, then I'm also having a much more uh, openness and receptivity, and it can lend. It lands very differently within me. So in a way, it's not as loud as the physical radiance, like this more internal spiritual radiance.
Exactly. So, in our own self perception, what we emphasize in our own experience, but then also to recognize it, notice it in others. Again, the external one is more compelling, convincing, because, like you say, more loud. And if we are tuned into our own subtle radiance, then it's easier also to recognize and notice it in others. Very good point. Relevant, yeah. Maybe we try to take it in a more practical, hands-on, applied, what to do area of looking at the different areas of Radiantly Alive, starting more with the physical and energetic aspects, which in some ways have some relation to the external, but also then the emotional, mental, intellectual, spiritual aspects of radiance, which can be more internal, don't have to be. But the question, the direction, what can we do to cultivate radiance on those different levels? What are practices that work for you? What are tools that you apply which help you to amplify that radiance in the different areas of your life? And that is kind of from an already established level to amplify it even more, and also as we discussed in the beginning, this topic, if I'm down, if it's a rainy day and it's a heavy season and things go wrong, obstacles in my life, then how did you pull yourself out of difficult situations? Maybe there's a certain order, kind of first I amp up my physical vitality, and then it's easier for this and that other more subtle aspect to unfold. Or first I need to set the intention. Without that, I cannot even move physically at all. So, what are your practical hands on experiences with cultivating, developing, amplifying your radiance at the different levels?
Beautiful, beautiful question. Lots of threads there to pick up on. I mean, I think one that definitely, like, I think the more subtle that you work, the more centered you have to be, as a general rule of thumb. And so if you're really out of sync energetically, like this woman that was saying, okay, I'm putting my breath out and I'm holding it out and I can't hold it out. It's like, well, that's definitely not a day to practice your pranayama practice. And it might not even be a day to practice your meditation practice. It's like, that might be a day where you need to do more asana practice, like get more into the physical body, get more into the feeling of centeredness. And then when you've realigned a little bit, you can start up your practice of pranayama, start up your practice of moving the energy. It really has been my experience that if the energy is at all uncentered, if you're not centered in that and you really start to flush energy through the system, it can make it even more uncentered. So that's a beautiful thing to be aware of on the mat is, where am I in this moment? How am I in this moment? What needs to be cared for first? In my own journey, there was kind of a quite different spin on things, which was that I got very into pranayama and meditation, and that just consumed all my time of practice. And I think there was a wisdom behind that. It definitely bore a lot of fruit. But at the same time, in the longer rhythm of practice, actually, my physical radiance significantly declined, actually. It was like I was not that strong. I was not that, I missed out on the asana. And in that way, the kind of intelligence of yoga, which lays out, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, asana, pranayama, meditation, as one kind of seamless experience. But where, like I said earlier, you find your stick shift, you find your moment, you find what practices is right for me today. Am I just ready to go fully in with all of the practices of the subtle body and with energy, or maybe it's a day to just practice a little bit of yin yoga and the intelligence to find what's needed is part of the technology. But I also feel like in a weird way, in the end, that's what makes yoga so powerful, is that it does address every side of the question of radiance, right? It's like the spiritual radiance is there, the energetic radiance is there, the physical radiance is there, and you're caring for all of the components. And maybe on some days it's a little bit more one than the other, and then the next day it's a little bit more the other than the other, and you find your way to move through that experience. But it is a system that's designed for radiance on all levels. And I feel like that's it would seem like that would be obvious, except for the fact that for thousands of years people have believed that the spirit was at the cost of the body. It's just like, okay, you either do one or the other. You either beat yourself into submission and the body's just not to be taken seriously in any way, and then I'm rich in spirit. But the concept that you're rich in your physical body, you're rich in your mental body, and you're rich in spirit, and those are all possible and not in any way conflicting with one another. That's the incredible, beautiful, powerful gift that is yoga. Where it's just all one integrated whole and understood to be an integrated whole, and all of the aspects of it are given equal reverence and equal love.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super relevant.
Mm.
This seeing and understanding in the bigger picture is huge,
Yeah.
as you described it, because historically, um, in different spiritual lineages and traditions, for centuries and millennia, it had mostly actually the tendency of more or less denying the body, the worldly existence, and all the mundane achievements,
Mm.
accomplishments, and favoring it, and instead favoring the spiritual depth going beyond body and mind, transcending, and in some ways leading to an escaping from the worldly existence, an escapism,
Mm.
what is sometimes called an up and out,
Yeah.
just trying to avoid the fleshy worldly existence, and then a lot of bashing on the desires and on the, yeah, kind of human neediness on all the different levels. So in many spiritual traditions, these human necessities of body and mind have a very bad reputation. They get a very bad rep. um, and there is a few spiritual paths which go the other way around, and there's many other worldly approaches of self-development, self-improvement,
Yeah.
psychotherapy, and many others, shadow work, etc., and a few select spiritual paths which embrace the physical being, the physicality, and the individuality, body mind, but then frequently at the cost of the absolute spiritual
Yeah.
oneness,
Yeah.
kind of not really seeing the depth
Mm.
of the spiritual awakening,
Mm.
and getting stuck in the duality, polarity of
Yeah.
pleasure and pain, and
Mm.
overemphasizing then on the physical. And that is, as you described, the beauty of a holistic path as is presented by yoga, to have that integration of the different levels, and not at the cost of one or the other. And it can come periodically, as you described, in your own path, of an almost like an overemphasis on internalizing breath work, pranayama, meditation, uh, at the cost of your physical well-being. And I remember own episodes in my path where it turned out like this. But then it's a natural intelligence, a counterbalancing, which is suggested by the yogic path, which doesn't keep you trapped just on that one overemphasis, but reminds us of the different ingredients which are necessary to be a fully embodied spiritual being, not just a transcendent and escaped spiritually awakened master, but to also embody that wisdom at the different levels of the physical, the energetic, emotional, psychological, etc.
And I feel we are right now actually in a very interesting and crucial moment in time where, like, our ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, many came from this up and out approach, from this denying of the
Mhm.
body. Many of the techniques also that we are using, or part of the techniques that we are using, are having that purpose. Um, and right now, yoga is so much broken down into the physicality only, like into only extracting asana, what for? To be fit and strong and healthy and feel good in the body. And all the rest kind of falls away. So I feel we are at the moment kind of historically almost at a very big shifting point, or it already shifted, right?
Mhm.
Into, like, if we look in the majority of yoga practitioners, I wouldn't call like everybody a yogi, but people who use yoga asana, I guess the majority is for this physical radiance, kind of using the yoga practice for the physical radiance. And for sure, the physical radiance is important, kind of to anchor also back spirit into body, to anchor back, to make this connection of male female, basically, of of the polarities of acknowledging our physicality, acknowledging our embodiment, and seeing that or understanding and living that as part of spirit as well. But now it's like important, I feel, to preserve the spirit in yoga, to not let yoga become a therapy method. Like there's also this big therapy movement in yoga, which is fantastic, and I'm so grateful for that to exist. But it's also basically extracting or I don't want to devalue the yoga therapy because I think there's a huge value in it, but it takes basically the technology for physical, energetic, emotional healing rather than for spiritual liberation. So yoga has a new application, and I feel it's so important to keep the spirit alive in yoga, to manage that, to bridge that. And I feel it's really up to us and like-minded yogis to bring that together and to share that kind of, to it's kind of a fusion, a new type of union that's happening nowadays, I feel.
We were just talking about it very much today, and it's funny that you say that. I feel like, the spirit of yoga is the name of the podcast also, like the preserving the spirit of yoga. And it came up today in the Zoom call on our 200-hour course, and I was just saying, imagine the world if everybody who practiced asana from 4 years old to 104 years old understood that they were practicing moving pranayama. That it was just like a play with the great force of life that's present in your body. And of course there are physical rewards to that, there are mental rewards to that, there's every kind of reward for that. But just what a different experience the world would be having of yoga if just that one little tiny thing, asana as moving pranayama, were really understood by the people who are practicing. I think it would have a radical change on the whole field of yoga, actually.
Maybe to clarify and emphasize that, what you're saying is that the posture-based practice of yoga could be understood as a pranayama in motion, as a breath work in the movement of the body. So instead of having that exclusive focus on the physical musculoskeletal system only, to incorporate the respiratory system, but also the energetic system, because pranayama is not just the respiratory gymnastics of breathing deeply, but pranayama is the art of moving the vital life force, which is directly connected to the breath. So if we would see our posture practice of asanas as a breath work, as a life work in motion, where the movements and positions of the asanas facilitate a deepening of the breath, and not only an amplification but also a refinement of the energetic flow, aligning ourselves not just physically, the physical correctness, 45 or 60 degree angle in my back foot, that's also relevant to protect my knee and have a healthy alignment in my hip and spine, sure, but undervalued, underestimated the subtle, more internal aspects of the posture practice, which brings us back to the initial topic of the internal side of radiance, which does relate to the breath and the energy movement, and then can also take us into an emotional balance, and then, as you described, beyond my individual well-being of my body and mind, and how radiant do I look to others, or how alive do I feel inside, while possibly forgetting the spiritual aspects of transcendence, of connecting to the oneness, which, even if the body doesn't look radiant from outside, even if I don't feel vital within, still in the absolute eternal presence beyond my individuality everything is aligned and meant to be. Life is even beyond the aliveness of my individual body mind. So incorporating all those different aspects and holding space for them in this integral yoga journey, which encompasses the different layers of my individual being, radiance in my physical body, my energies, my emotions, mind, intellect, and then bridging out of my individual vitality, vibrancy, into that universal awareness, which is in some ways beyond, yet encompassing all my individual aspects. So, yes, a wonderful exploration of the holistic perspective of yoga on the topic of radiantly alive, not just the beach body shining brightly, but in a way a more integrated and holistic vision of radiance, external and internal, for me individually experienced and outwardly apparent in my individual body mind, but ultimately also transcending these timely limits of my individual existence and connecting to the universal radiance of life shining beyond our individual being. So, thank you for sharing your experience, your vision, your understanding of radiance on the different levels. I would still be curious about more techniques, but luckily we have more episodes to explore these topics. So I think we wrap it up for today, but I'm very excited to take it in future episodes to deeper applied levels and test your life experiences and share some even more secret pearls of wisdom of your toolbox, so we can share these treasures of yogic wisdom with the broader community. So, yes, let's wrap it up. And we are looking forward to welcoming you actually in our next episode, a being who is very obviously radiantly alive. He definitely has the beach body. And he is like so apparent, so radiantly alive. It is Mark Laws, our dear friend, a co-teacher also on some of our courses. And he's a hero of the yogic path. He's an athlete. He's a shining being from the depth of his heart. So you definitely don't want to miss out on his radiance. So Mark Laws in our next episode sharing his wisdom on Radiantly Alive. And we're looking forward to seeing you there.
So this was Wisdom in Motion with the Akasha family. Keep shining in the spirit of yoga.
Om.